Hello, everyone, and good morning. It's so great to see all of you here live and in person. My name is Vitka Raven. I'm the Institutional Giving Director here at the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco. Welcome to Canberra Hall and this morning's program, Good Inside, with Dr. Becky Kennedy and Katie Hintz-Zambrano. Our community here today includes Golden Gate Mothers Group, Natural Resources, Good Inside, of course, Books Inc., Laurel Village, and our wonderful media sponsor, KLW 91.7 FM, where you can listen to this show and many of the amazing guests who have appeared right here on this stage on Bina Creative Voices from the JCCSF, which airs every Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't miss it. And of course, there's you. The Jewish Community Center of San Francisco is a nonprofit, and we rely on the generosity of institutions and individuals like you, so thank you. We wouldn't be here without you all. As I mentioned earlier, I work in fundraising here at the J. I'm also a mom of a 2-year-old, GFK, a fellow cycle breaker, who often struggles with PNP time and finding her MGI. Yes, millennials like their acronyms. When I first held my daughter in my arms, one single thought occupied my head. All I want is for her to be happy. Fast forward 2 days, and we're both crying on the sofa at home, one hungry, the other frantically trying to get someone, anyone, on Zoom to help her feed her newborn during a global pandemic. Forget happy. I couldn't even meet her most basic need. I dug myself a deep hole and sat in a muddy puddle of mom guilt. In a quieter moment, a few weeks later, researching all sorts of parenting approaches, I came across a headline that piqued my interest. It read, "Dr. Becky doesn't think the goal of parenting is to make your kid happy. Instead of striving for happy, this clinical psychologist suggested building kids' resiliency and tolerance for life's distress is a more effective way to fend off anxiety in adulthood. Instead of scrambling to find ways to turn off feelings of discomfort, frustration, anger, disappointment, we learn to dim them. I started following Dr. Becky's buzzing Instagram and eventually joined the Good Inside membership community. And hands from parents all over started reaching into that little hole I had dug for myself, pulling me out by sharing their experiences, offering words of support, and directing me towards Dr. Becky's many resources and strategies to help forge connection with my daughter and myself. When Dr. Becky announced she was publishing a book, the kind of parenting handbook I so desperately wanted to reference on day 2 of meeting my daughter and many days thereafter, I had to ping my colleague Stephanie Singer, who curates our Arts and Ideas series here at the J, to see if she could bring Dr. Becky and Good Insight to the JCC. And she delivered. So without further delay, please help me give a warm JCCSF welcome to Dr. Becky Kennedy and Katie Hintz-Zambrano.
So we have a lot to talk about, but before we officially jump in, I truly want to thank all of you for a number of things. Number one, thank you for coming today. My team knows this, the book team. I was like, we're doing an event on like a Sunday at 11, like for parents? And then I kind of reframed it. I was like, but I guess that's like exactly what we're doing, because everyone here knows this book is about so much more than strategies. Good Insight's about so much more. It's really about parents, growing and feeling strong and feeling like they actually can be other things beyond a caregiver, and how tapping into our own sturdiness benefits ourselves and actually benefits our kids. And so one thing I know is everyone here had to tap into their sturdiness, had to set up some logistics, had to tolerate someone else's distress to carve out time to be here on Sunday at 11 in the rain. Yes. And I will be doing all of my events Sunday at 11 from this point forward to really put my money where my mouth is about our philosophy. So that's number one, thank you. Number two is a lot of you came up to me in the pre-event with some members and have said something like, you got me through the pandemic, like, thank you so much. And I go to a really, really dark mental health place when I don't have a space to create. And to me, impact is like one of the most important things to feel. I think it's why we need to be in community, because like actually having impact on other people is something that we need for our mental health, and I really need it. So in the pandemic, the fact that you all like gave me a space and a platform to create, to share your stories, which led to more ideas that I could put out there. Like, I promise you, it was a extremely mutually beneficial relationship. So thank you for that as well. And now to Katie.
Yeah. Again, thanks for everybody for being here. I wanted to do a quick show of hands as to how many people have watched a Dr. Becky video on their iPhone or Android device, I guess. Okay, and then leave your hand up if you've actually like employed some of the methods. I mean, that's like really amazing. So bravo to you, Dr. Becky. And this is not a humble brag, but I've interviewed quite a number of people, but when I told friends that I was interviewing Dr. Becky, it was like Beatles mania in my DMs. It's a different level of obsession. I'm like, whoa, like I had no idea, and then I really started digging in, and so I just want to talk about the phenomenon that is Dr. Becky to kick it off, and like, when did this start? When did you go pop? Like, when was the big break?
So I've always felt a desire when I was in private practice. I was in private practice after getting my PhD, and I actually wasn't working with kids in play therapy at that point. I'd worked with kids in grad school, but realized that I was drawn to working with their parents even more, because I think therapy for kids is so important. And I just remember thinking, I'm with a kid for 45 minutes. Then they're with their parents in their home for all the other minutes. If I can even have like an iota of impact on their family environment, that to me felt really, really compelling. And then I was in private practice. I did a lot of parenting work, and I was working with adults in kind of intensive psychotherapy. And I had this desire to like think more, to talk to more people outside my office. And so I actually like thought of this sleep product that I kind of MacGyvered for my DFK daughter, my deeply feeling child. And it really changed her relationship with sleep. And it led me to explore this with a friend. Like, do I want to put this product out into the world? And I was telling my sister, who's a lot younger than me, she's like, well, if you're gonna put out a product, you have to be on Instagram. And I was like, I don't even know like what Instagram was. But it did lead me to say, okay, well, what would I write? And then I had these weeks of just writing and writing. I was like, I have a lot to say. And in those weeks, my friend and I realized the ideas behind the product were way more interesting and compelling and at the core than the product. And so we kind of put the product on hold, and I just had all this writing. And I was like, well, now I don't know what to do with it. And my husband truly was just like, well, it lives on your computer. You put it out on Instagram. And then I put out my first post, which is, the timing is nuts, on February 28th, 2020, which was 2 weeks before New York City, where I live, shut down. And then 2 weeks after, I put out this post about how our kids will remember more about how coronavirus that time would feel in their family homes than anything about the virus itself. And a whole post about how to wire your kids for resilience in a time of uncertainty. And then things just took off from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then why a book now, and why this book?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you follow me on Instagram or listen to the podcast, you probably know, like, we put out a lot of content. There's a lot of stuff out there. And so pretty early in my Instagram journey, book agents and publishers were reaching out to me saying, like, you seem to have a lot to say. I think you have a book in you. But honestly, for 6 months or maybe more, I was like, I don't feel like I have a book in me. Like, I was just like really experimenting with ideas in this forum. And I felt like that was fulfilling my, writing and exploration desires. And then toward the end of 2020, something really interesting happened, where I was like, wow, all of my posts, like the way I think about Instagram or even a podcast is like, it's an idea here, it's an idea here. It's just like little things here and there. And I was like, wait, there's actually like a foundation to all of them. And there's like a much larger story I'd want to tell about kids and parents and relationships. And the only way I could actually express that whole arc would be in a book. Instagram just doesn't allow for that. And so then I was like, I have a book in me. And then the writing began. And that's really what this book is. Like, it's not a collection of Instagram posts at all. It's really something totally different.
Yeah, I love it. I've read almost all of it now, and I have a 9-year-old, so I was like, this isn't going to apply to me. I don't have a young kid, but it totally does. And I like that ageless approach that you have to it. I think it's great. And with that in mind, like a lot of people, you raised your hand, so you probably already know what you feel like Dr. Becky's main philosophy is, but I'd love to hear from yourself. How would you boil it down, and how's it different from other maybe connection first philosophies that are kind of floating around there?
Yeah. So good inside, like it's 2 words, it's like 10 letters. It's in some ways a simple phrase, but to me it actually is like a really revolutionary way of seeing people, right? And in some ways like definitely seeing kids. So I was trained, like when I realized I wanted to do more parenting work, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the best center, like I wanna get the best education, and so I went to this highly credentialed, Ivy League, best in class parenting center, and learned all about timeouts, punishments, sticker charts, praise, ignoring, and honestly, definitely during the program and even for a couple weeks, maybe months after, I loved it. I was like, this is amazing, because when we hear that stuff, those approaches, and you hear, okay, well, when your kid does something bad, you have to kind of extinguish the behavior, and then you get more of the good and less of the bad. Like the logical parts of our brain just light up, because that part of our brain, it loves logic and linearity, and your brain's like, that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna do that. And nobody in that program and nobody with those kind of behavior first approaches ever say, inherent to our approach is the belief that kids are bad inside. Like nobody says that. But I firmly believe that control and trust are opposites. And if you ever wonder why it feels so bad when someone's controlling you or like rushing you or looking over you, is because it feels like they're saying to you, like, I don't trust you. And being not trusted is an awful human feeling, because it almost feels like it's like, I don't trust that you're a good person, right? So imagine a boss who's comes up to your desk and is like, I need you to redo this report. You messed this all up. You need to do these things. I'm standing over. I'm watching you. You better go, right? Versus, hey, these things all have to be changed, and here's my notes, and I'm going to leave your office. I trust you to do a good job. It's like a polar opposite reaction. And so one of the things I realized with these other approaches, is I was like, well, no matter what, when I'm giving my kid a punishment, when I'm sending them away to a timeout in the moment they need me the most, my kid's not gonna remember those instances, right? We all know, like, we remember how people make us feel, not what they say and not what they do. And the message to my kid in those moments is like, I don't trust you. You're bad. I would only send you away. Also, I'd only have to give you stickers for being nice to someone if I felt like I also didn't trust you. Like there's such coercion there. And I was like, wow, so kids, like generations of kids are being raised feeling not good enough, feeling bad inside, which I think generations of kids have been raised. And then it got me thinking on the other side. There's like, okay, there's the other philosophy, like feelings and validation. And I'm a big feelings validation fan, but feelings and validation without really firm boundaries is also not a complete parenting philosophy, because kids need to see their feelings as real, but kids also need adults to act like adults and keep them safe physically and emotionally, right? Like a kid who's hitting a sibling, they don't just need, you're so mad, I get it. They need me to come in, say, I won't let you hit, remove them from their sibling, not only to protect the kid they're hitting, they needed to protect themselves from watching themselves feel like a monster. Like they need firm boundaries. And I just kept feeling like there's only 2 options in the field. Like there's this bad kid, punish and shape their behavior through sticker charts and timeouts, or there's the like feelings matter, but then kids feel totally out of control. And there has to be something beyond those 2 buckets. And That's what really led to this.
Yeah, I love that. Early on in the book, you talk about, quote, building a community of cycle breakers and forever learners. And I really loved that quote. And I don't know if past generations, if intrinsically every new generation of parenting is trying to break the cycle of what they were taught, but definitely today, and I think in this room, this is the era of so-called intensive parenting, right? So we're really conscious of everything we're doing, and I don't know if that is unique to this generation, that we're really trying to be cycle breakers, but how passionate are you about that? And I think that I can see that being a big part of your, changing the world almost philosophy.
Yeah, well, I think this is like, I don't want to even guard this secret. I hope the secret gets out, but that, like, this isn't only like a parenting approach. I think, and there's something in like these moments with our kids when we're able to set a boundary and say some version of, I'm not going to let you hit your sister. I'm sitting with you here. You're a good kid having a hard time. I don't know any parent who says that who doesn't feel something internally at the same time around like, I like so needed to hear that from someone. I never heard that. And we probably don't remember exactly what our parents said, but our body remembers. From those glances, from the dart eyes, from the what is wrong with you. Our body remembers being looked at as a monster. Like, we remember that. There's a really powerful phrase I think about, it's not mine. I cry whenever I think about it, for kids' development. It's, I am as I am seen. I am as I am seen. I actually think the same is true for us in our worst moments. And kids especially, they develop through the gaze they get from parents. Our kids respond to the versions of themselves who reflect back. And so how we look at our kids, which again doesn't mean we can get so black and white. People are like, oh, so they're a good kid, so you let them throw blocks? Like, no. Like, I'm not gonna let them throw blocks, actually, because they are a good kid. So I'm gonna stop them from acting in a way where they feel out of control. But I can still show them, and I think this is key to the approach, that I can differentiate who they are from what they did, right? And we'll get to the pad you all got later, but a version of this can be used for our kid. Like right now, think about something that you're really frustrated with about your kid, a behavior they have that's really frustrating. Raise your hand if you have a behavior in mind for your kid, if you have something that they're doing that's really frustrating. And if you don't, get out of this auditorium. Or tell us your secrets. No, of course we do, because they're human beings. Kids come into the world with every feeling, with the intensity we have them, and none of the skills. It's just an inconvenient truth. They have all the feelings and no skills. So feelings that don't have skills come out in behavior for kids and adults. So if you think about that behavior right now, so maybe it's my kid saying I hate you to me, or my kid's lying. Watch for how, even in our mind, the behavior collapses into identity. It feels like I have a bad kid, or I have a kid who's like a sociopath. They don't even care. They lie to my face. Versus, right? We're laughing because we're like, yeah, it's amazing when my kid's lying to me how I'm like predicting them being a sociopath, right? Like, we've all done that. And then we respond to our kid today, not based on the fact that they're struggling with something, but like to try to prevent them from being a mass murderer later on, right? But then what our kid feels is they're like, why is my parent looking at me like I'm a sociopath? That doesn't feel good. So the difference between that and I have a good kid who's lying. I have a good kid who's in a I hate you phase. I have a good kid who's hitting. It completely changes our framework. And in the group before this, we were talking about how actually the most powerful thing of all is to get a framework shift, right? As soon as we shift our framework, we feel unstuck. Then we can incorporate new strategies, right? It's totally different. And finally, returning to your brilliant question that I didn't answer yet, the truth is we have trouble shifting our framework. We have trouble seeing a good kid under our kids' behavior because so rarely we were seen as a good person under our behavior. And so then our mind doesn't react. This is why logic and any therapy that's just based on cognition is personally not a therapy or a parenting approach I think is particularly effective, because our body beats our brain every time. We feel before we think. We're animals, and this area, our circuitry, what we learned to survive, always beats our brain. Thank goodness, right? If you went outside and you were like, I think it's safe to cross the street, and a car came, guess what? Your body would put you back on the sidewalk, right? Like, you're not, oh, is that car gonna hurt me? Like, that would be logic. Thank goodness it doesn't take over. And so actually, I think there's a lot of this in the book. Frankly, it would be a different book. It would be a combination of reparenting, triggers, like those other topics. Like, yes, if we're continually showing up with our kids and thinking, like, why am I not thinking of the thing? Why am I reacting? Why am I triggered? I've been practicing the strategy. Why do I do something totally different in the moment? It's a reparenting journey we need, right? And I think anybody in our membership will be like, yeah, the reparenting and triggers workshops did more to help me use the strategies I want to use with my kid than any time I tried to memorize the strategies again, because that changed my body, right? And that's not our fault. It doesn't mean we're bad people at all. It means our circuitry is like asking to be rewired, not only to show up differently for our kids, but really also just to feel more healed and more sturdy ourselves.
Yeah. One thing that I'm sure you read all the headlines, and you also have, you still have people coming to you and saying their problems every day. I don't know if anxiety and depression in children has been something that you've personally seen. I definitely read so many headlines and so many studies about this, and it's so grim and so sad, and there's so much going on in our world, and the onslaught of social media and the news, and so of course our children are anxious, and they're getting anxious and depressed earlier than ever before. What, like, with your philosophy, does that help address some of this and try to create this, safety or whatever with the parents that can help it from, starting in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such an important question. It's true. And in a good way, I think the media has brought attention to this. Mm-hmm. Especially teenagers and young kids are having a really hard time, mm-hmm. right? So a couple things. So our kids are growing up, as we know, in like a completely different world than we grew up, right? And I know our parents probably said the same thing, but I think there's like a much bigger shift. So a couple things. Our kids are brought up in a world where there is constant ability to gratify their like every demand, right? To some degree, learning to cope with frustration is like the single most important thing, I think, in childhood. Because like we're all frustrated as adults, right? I always think like, I don't know any adult who ever came to my private practice and was like, my parents were so amazing. They got frustration and jealousy and disappointment out of my body. Like I never felt it again. But I know a lot of adults who, they don't say this, but their stories tell it. Like, I basically have the same coping skills for frustration and disappointment and jealousy at age 45 as I did when I was 2. Like, I never learned coping skills. And I think it's really easy, actually, now to not have our kids learn those skills because there's like an ease to parts of their life, right? I'm thinking, like, if I wanted a new toy, and even my mom, let's say she was gonna get me a toy, okay, when I was 5, all of us, there's a process. They'd be like, well, when can we get to the store? You go to the store, and you're like, they don't have it. Okay, we're gonna order it. Just think about the difference in your body versus what happens when you're like, and then like it's there, maybe in 2 hours, maybe the next day. And that's one tiny moment. That's one moment. One of the ways I think about anxiety is I actually don't think anxiety is a feeling itself. I think it's a reaction to a feeling. I think it's the experience of not wanting to feel the way you're feeling. It's like running away from a feeling in your body. And our world is a little bit set up to help kids run away from frustration. And I should add, if there's means, it's really set up for that because money can buy kids' way out of frustration in a heartbeat, right? Oh, they're out of this, we're gonna get this. You weren't invited to this party, we'll throw you another party. You didn't make this soccer team, we'll drive you to the other town or someone will and get on that soccer team. And what a kid's body really learns is this feeling of maybe sadness or frustration in me. Like my parent couldn't tolerate it in me. My parent kind of ran circles to do anything to turn this feeling off. Now let's fast forward to teenage years. A kid feels down, a kid was left out. As we get older, it's harder and harder to find things in our world to just make it better. I think we all know that. We all lived that in the pandemic. We're like, wow, all I can do is just cope with this. That's it. And if a kid's early years really were all about getting out of frustration, getting out of disappointment, then a kid never had the opportunity to learn tolerance for any of those skills. So when you think about the setup for anxiety, anytime those things come up, the body's like, what? Where's the solution? Where's happy? Where is it? What can I do? Where do I get it better? And then they're paralyzed. Of course they are, because their body not only didn't learn the skills, but they internalized their parents' fear of that, right? Our kids can only learn to tolerate feelings we tolerate in them. Hard stop. Hard stop. And kids know when we can't tolerate, right? So of course there's a moment to say, oh, my kid didn't make the soccer team. Can I not have them do another soccer team? Of course we can. But there's a difference in the speed of that versus my first reaction being like, that stinks. Are you going to take me? Can we make another team? You know what? Not right now. We're not going to talk about another team. You wanted to make that team, and you didn't. Like, that's really hard. That's real. I believe you. Those moments are the essence of resilience building and lower a kid's vulnerability to anxiety because that's one additional feeling they don't have to run away from in their body, right? I think another big idea, and then I know it's a long answer, is feelings don't give kids problems. Feeling alone in feelings gives kids problems. Same thing for adults. And we can't take away a feeling, or if we do, we see that what would happen, but we can actually we can take away the aloneness by being present. So there's also an irony there. My kid's upset about something, and when I run to take them into a different feeling, not only do they not build coping skills, they actually have aloneness, because the next time they have that feeling, they imagine me not in the feeling, but taking them away. So there's like a huge paradox here. I really do believe that we have this opportunity in our kids to intercede with this pattern that seems to be happening with these like kids who are really, really anxious and feeling really, really empty. Right? Well, emptiness is, if you think about that, it's like if there's a whole range of feelings you can't feel in your body, that is the experience of emptiness. As soon as a feeling comes, you have to run away from it. Every time we take that moment to just say to our kid, I'm so glad we're talking about this. This is so important. Yeah, you really feel that way. I believe you. You're allowed to feel that way. What I'm really saying to my kid is I'm less afraid of your emotional reality than you are. I am less afraid. I see it, it's real, and I'm less afraid of it than you are. And we're in it together because I'm willing to talk to you about it. Because I'm willing to sit, as I call on this emotional bench that you're on. And that, I really think, is like the biggest gift for kids. Because that prepares them to be adults who still, of course, will have hard feelings, but their wiring will lead to them being able to cope with the widest range rather than have to run away from a pretty wide range.
Mm-hmm. That's great, thank you. I know one of your favorite chapters is Tell the Truth in the book. What number of chapters out of people?
I think it's 9.
9, okay.
9.
But yeah, so tell me about that concept and why that's so, I think it's really important, I was saying, for parents everywhere, but especially kids that are seeing a lot, especially in like urban settings and stuff.
So yeah, the first 10 chapters are these like principle chapters, right? And I think as you read them, you'll hopefully also see like, wow, this is as applicable to me or my parents or my partnership. They're really just human relationships, right? And the Tell the Truth chapter like kind of made me laugh as I was writing it. I was like, this doesn't seem like very profound. Like, tell the truth, okay? I don't know a lot of parents who are like, I want to lie to my kid's face. You know, it doesn't. No one wants to operate that way. And I was on a podcast with Glennon Doyle, which was a huge treat, and she said it best when we were talking about this idea. She was like, wow, like gaslighting has become an appropriate, acceptable parenting strategy. Like, we gaslight our kids often. So what does tell the truth? Why does it matter? And what would that look like in practice? So our kids are more perceptive to their environment, more sensing of their environment than we are as adults, because they have to be. Because if you think about evolution, right, which is what drives us all, we're animals, we are helpless as a species for so many years, right? Think about the age at which you would feel pretty confident that your kid could survive on their own. It's a long time, right? A really disturbingly unfortunate long time, right? So for the first number of years, everything about their wiring and everything about that they take in from the world is really based in this helplessness that they feel. So how do you survive if you're a helpless animal? Well, you better notice everything around you in case it's a threat, and then go find an adult who could keep you safe. So you become extra hypervigilant. And yet there's this narrative about young kids. They're too young to talk about that. There's no way they notice that. Whatever that is, I promise you your kids have noticed. Like, I don't even know what it is in your head. If you are thinking about it, the fight we had with our partner when we were screaming and our kid was upstairs, they heard it. I've seen my kid's reaction when I yelled at my husband to take out the trash. We all know that doesn't even count as a fight. That's just a day-to-day interaction, okay? And I saw my kid's body freeze. I saw it. And then I think if we're screaming at each other and my kid's upstairs watching TV, that my kid wouldn't have noticed the single threat to their family system, which is their parents arguing. Now, to be clear, this actually isn't at all meant to say you can't argue like that. We all know we don't want to argue like that, and hopefully we're working on it. The point is, when we assume our kids don't know or don't notice, we don't tell them the truth. And then they're left alone with all the things they perceive and sensed without an adult to tell a story to them and explain things to them. Versus, hey, you were watching TV and me and your dad were really yelling at each other pretty loud. I want to let you know that I'm guessing you heard that. I probably felt really scary. You can always come to me if you notice that. We can talk about it. It's never your fault when I yell. We're safe as a family, and we're going to be working on talking to each other more respectfully. Life-changing. Because let's say the kid notices that, which again, for all these reasons, I think they do, and we don't talk to them. What does the kid do then? Well, they probably wire this in their body. I guess I was wrong to notice that. No, that couldn't have happened. And what does that look like? Not one time, of course, but let's say this is a pattern of kind of assuming our kids don't notice. We wonder why so many teenagers were like, how did you not know that party was like such a bad idea? You saw it going south. Why didn't you leave? Well, I don't think kids say this, but they're like, well, you pretty much encouraged me to tune out dangerous and uncomfortable things around me for a lot of my years. So I've become pretty good at telling myself, this probably isn't a big deal. I'm making a big deal out of nothing. We do that, like, it's really profound, I think, how we can train our kids to tune out the world around them, right? And we were talking about this. You walk by someone who, is an unhoused person. And your kid's like, what's going on? We're like, shh, don't talk about that, right? Or our kids ask a question about race. We don't talk about that. A kid doesn't learn that I should talk about that with my parent after. If we don't follow up or we don't say something different, they learn, I was wrong to notice that. I shouldn't notice that. These are bad things to talk about. And the next time I notice something that's a little uncertain, I definitely shouldn't go to a parent about it. I'm bad, I'm wrong to bring such a thing up, right? And so race, socioeconomic status, fighting, death, right? Death is one of these things. I'll never forget this family who came to see me when their kid had sudden sleeping problems, which can come from so many issues, right? And finally, I kind of asked a lot of questions, and they're like, well, yeah, her grandfather died. She was 3. And I was like, what did you tell her? And they're like, what do you mean, what did we tell her? I was like, well, what did you tell her? And they were like, we said he went to sleep for a long time. We haven't seen him since, literally. And then you saw it was the father. He's like, wait a second, And I'm like, yeah, and then we were like, it wasn't like it immediately remitted. But even if it wasn't a sleep issue, we think our kid doesn't notice that we're saying the word funeral over and over when they've never heard that word. We think our kid doesn't notice that we're crying to a friend. Our kid notices when we skip one word in a book. We know that. We think a kid doesn't know we're pregnant when their eyesight is at your belly. That's literally the way they perceive your body, right? And then people are like, they are playing with a lot of babies all of a sudden, but I don't think they know. I'm like, of course they know. They don't know it in the same way, but there's a huge cost to thinking that kids, number 1, don't notice, and number 2, aren't ready. They're ready. Information doesn't scare kids. Being alone in the absence of information terrifies kids. It's literally being alone in the dark. And as soon as you say, hey, I think you've been hearing this word funeral. Grandpa died. Do you know what that word means? Die, death. I'd wait, they probably won't say anything. Death is when the body stops working. Death does not mean you go to sleep forever. Death does not mean you're in the sky, right? Like, we have to tell our kids what these things mean, right? How does the baby get in the belly? How does it get in? How does it get in? If you want your teenagers to talk to you about the tricky things in their life, then we have to think the wiring for that doesn't start when they're 14. It starts when they're curious about things early and are confused early, and whether their body remembers, my parent was able to connect to me about this, or actually my parent left me with my curiosity and also maybe made me feel kind of bad or ashamed for that curiosity, not intentionally, right? So I think that chapter, it really is one of my favorites because it's so simple. It's like, yeah, tell the truth. But there's so many ways, and again, none of this is our fault. My guess is whatever topics you find tricky to talk about with your kids honestly, without a doubt, I know are the topics no adult talk to you about honestly. So even thinking about talking about sex or death or how babies are made is a cycle-breaking moment. So of course it feels awkward. It feels super awkward, right? But this is a room of cycle breakers, right? And we have such power to do something so different when we think that our kids are ready and when they need our presence through truthful information.
Love that. Chapter 9.
Chapter 9.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a couple questions about your own childhood and
We're
what
going
was
there?
We're
I
going
wasn't
there
ready for that.
at the very end, and then it's questions. No, I thought we should go there a little bit. But because I think it's something that I don't know if you always have talked about it yet. But how big was your family? Where did you grow up?
Yeah.
And what kind of parenting habits, if you weren't a cycle breaker, would you just inherit, or what do you remember about?
Yeah.
The parenting that you received?
No. So I'm one of 3. I have an older brother and I have a younger sister. My sister is 5.5 years younger. So I'm told from the literature I'm not a true middle child because I had that space early on, but I am a middle. And I grew up with a mom and a dad who were married. And I grew up in Scarsdale, New York, a very privileged, relatively homogeneous kind of place to grow up. My childhood was interesting from a parenting perspective for a lot of ways. I mean, yes, I would consider myself a cycle breaker, though I think the degree of cycle breaking in terms of 0 to 180 any of us want to do, it's always hard, but certainly the greater the degree, the harder. And there are definitely a lot from my parents that I want to take in. My mom was a very, all the emotions are allowed. All the emotions, my emotions were definitely seen as real and valid, definitely seen for feelings under behaviors I was. My dad was much more of the logical linearity, but frankly, he also was working a lot more. So I think I had a lot more time with my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom. A couple things stand out from my childhood that I think about a lot is infused into here and infused into how I want to do things differently with my own kids too. Number one, I feel like my mom was an example of all the feelings were allowed, but boundaries were really hard for her, right? And so she was always available. And that sounds amazing, but in some ways, I feel like a lot of my early adulthood was really reworking, the people around you in adulthood who love you, they're not always available. They're not always attuned to your needs. They're not always dropping what they do to bring you a bagel at, middle school because you forgot it. They're oh, you forgot a bagel? Get lunch at the cafeteria. That's not rude. It's just that boundaries involve a prioritization of yourself, which means you're not always available for others. The other thing that I reflect on a lot is anger in my family was definitely not allowed. There was this narrative of your mom does so much and how could you be mad at her for anything? And I think that's informed a lot, right? It definitely informs a 2 things are true perspective. Wait, we can be mad at people we love. We can be grateful that people did some things for us and also, angry about other things. And then the other thing that really sticks out, I think, from my early years it really goes into that resilience over happiness, was this fixing. Was this there was an ability to fix. And
And I feel like that made my adult years like so much harder because you can't always fix things. Like you can't always make something better. And I really, really do believe that like we find ourselves in our hardest times. Like you just kind of like get through it. And there's such strength that comes from that. And I think there was this way in my childhood where I wasn't allowed to like be upset for too long. Like I was seen for being upset, but then it was like, okay, here's this thing and here's what we can do. And I think the thing that, how that all kind of really comes together in Good Inside and so many other areas, is like, I just feel like there's this new way to think about parenthood, right? And there's a lot of women in here, right? And I think there's an extra gendered lens that, like, so many of us were raised, I'm curious, I'm gonna raise my hand, talk about my childhood. How many of you were raised to be kind of like you were a good girl, whatever that meant? Yeah, wow, that's amazing. So I was too. And as I've rethought this, I was like, that's like a tricky term, good girl. It sounds very, I mean, now that I think about it, it feels like a little creepy, you know? Like, oh. But I feel like good girls are kids, or good boy, good kid, who are kind of trained early on to be more oriented to what others want of them than what they want for themselves, period. That's what it means. And we're praised a lot as parents if we have kids like this, because like compliance in children and kids who don't have their own needs and just kind of like blindly go along with the crowd in a way, like it's like, wow, what did you do? You're such an amazing parent, right? And then again, we have this binary where it's like, if it's not that, you're a bad kid. And so, like, the way that even all comes to Good Inside, I'm like, there has to be a way where you can love a parent or love someone and be mad at them. There has to be a way where you can be attuned to your own needs and still be a good person. Like, there has to be a way to hold these things together. And I feel like we've been given these models that are, like, really, like, in a box. And, like, our heart just knows that it's, like, not it. Like, we know, like, I feel very limited by this. Like, this can't be the way. And I think beyond any strategy or approach, this idea that, especially as moms, that like we can't pour ourselves out forever. Like all of you are here. You did something to set a boundary to come here. This whole like motherhood is martyrdom. I don't need anything. I'm here to serve everyone else. Like I really feel like we're the generation to be like, nope. Not anymore. Like, we don't have to, we're not. And we have access to a community of other people who are like fighting that fight too, to give something different to ourselves and then give something really different to our kids. Right before this, right before my book tour, my oldest son said to me, I see my friends in the crowd, I was telling this last night, he literally goes, Mom, and he's almost 11, he goes, I know you're happy about like this thing you're doing. Like that. And he goes, but I just want to let you know, I really liked it better when you worked 2 days a week. And I think like everything about Good Inside actually came together in that moment in a way. Because I don't need my son's approval for the decisions I'm making. And that comment is not a barometer of how good of a person or parent I am. And because I feel so fulfilled by this, because I feel confident that this is important, I actually can see his feelings as something I can empathize with, not as something, I'm not centering myself, right? When we go into, whether it's I hate you or that, like, oh, you don't respect me, it's amazing. It's like, it's so centering of ourselves and someone else's experience. Like, I think you're saying that to me because you don't respect me. It's like a pretty big leap versus, yeah, of course you would. You wanted me to work 2 days a week. Like, I get that. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. And you wish I could be home every day when you get home from school. But I feel like that's the fight of like, yeah, my whole existence isn't to show up only in the way you want me to show up. And that feels like a pretty big shift from my early years. And that definitely feels like a really big shift from the narrative we're told about who like good mothers are. And it's a shift I could not be more excited to be making with all of you.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're going to do one last question, and then we're going to do a selfie and then a Q&A.
Awesome.
So get your
Perfect.
questions ready and your lipstick on. Yeah, last question is just, if somebody couldn't finish the whole book, or if they just want a quick, or they want to buy it for a friend or whatever, what's like one big lesson that you feel like you would really love people to take away from this book?
Okay, I love ending with that. And like, when people ask me a one thing question, I'm really
hard,
bad
yeah.
student like that, because I'm always like, I can't be boxed into a corner. But this one I can, and I will, because there truly is one. And it's like the importance of repair, and the importance of the idea that it's not too late. There is no strategy more important for parents to get good at than repair. And if you only read one section, read It's Not Too Late chapter for sure. And if you really think about that, if you're like, okay, if Dr. Becky's like, I have to get really good at repair, then she's telling me I like kind of have to keep yelling at my kids. Because like, I'm gonna need the only way I can repair is if there's a rupture, right? But that is what I'm telling you. Raise your hand if you yell at your kids sometimes. Okay, put your hand down. Raise your hand if you've said words coming out of your mouth that you're like, I do not want to be a parent who's saying these words to my kid. Like, and those in the front, like, keep your hands up if that's true for you. Look back and just like, really, this is so important. Like, we are shown these Instagram pictures. We take babies home from the hospital and are only told how to buckle them into the car seat. Like, that's really true. There is no job in the world that's as hard and important and ongoing as parenting, and there's no job that gets as little support and resources and realistic expectations as parenting. And then many of us, when things are hard, we take it in as our fault, when it's not our fault. When things are hard, it's often a sign of the resources and support we need and deserve and aren't getting. And so how does that all relate to repair? Well, parenting is just hard, right? Parenting is hard. We've all established, we all yell at our kids, we've all said things, it's true. So what happens after that? What happens after I've called my kid a spoiled brat? What happens after I scream so loud that it even scares me after? Well, let's walk through this. My kid is now in their room, and I'm in somewhere else in my house, let's say. We're separated. And we'll often think as parents, especially if time goes on, like, well, they didn't bring it up, like it seems fine now. Okay, the body doesn't lie. The body is our storer of memories, which we want it to. Again, we perceive things. So my kid stores the fact that I yelled at him. Now, again, watch the guilt, but remember, wait, we've all done it. This is just a universal experience. So now my kid has this experience of having been yelled at. Kids, when they're alone in distress, again, the aloneness is the problem, not the distress. When they're alone in distress, they literally have two coping skills at their disposal, and two only. Self-doubt, as we've established here. Am I making too big of a deal out of this? Did this really happen? And if we wonder why so many adults don't trust themselves, that's that legacy that lives on. Or self-blame. I'm a bad kid and I did this. I'm too much. I'm too much. And if I was only better, this wouldn't have happened, because it is always safer for a kid to take on control and badness and preserve their parents as good than to feel good and feel like the world around them and their parents who they need are bad. It's literally non-conducive with survival, so they take it on. And if we want to know why so many adults, when things are hard, go into, what's wrong with me? I'm not enough. I'm too much. No one else but me would do something like this. I'm such a bad person. I'm a monster. That also is the way we've wired in our body when we were alone in distress. That self-blaming kind of tendency. Okay, so those are their only two options, but something much more hopeful. What happens when I go to their room? Even if it's, hey, I want to talk about something that happened last week, okay? If I go to their room, imagine this. I literally go into like the book of their life and I reopen it. I take it off the shelf and I'm like, hey, let's go back to that chapter. That chapter ended in feelings that didn't feel good for either of us, as we've established. I have such an amazing opportunity. I can literally rewrite the ending of that chapter by adding all of the elements that were missing in the first place, by adding connection and compassion and understanding. I'm so sorry I yelled. It's never your fault when I yell at you. And you might be thinking, but they were being really slow getting ready for school. We don't yell at our kids because what they're doing. We yell at our kids because we're having trouble tolerating the feelings in our body when we see what they're doing. That's a completely different situation. Nobody likes when their kids are whining or stalling, but it is possible to be less reactive. So we name it, we take responsibility, and we say some version of, I know that was scary. You were right to feel that way. That undoes the lack of self-trust, and I'm working on it. I've literally changed the way that memory will live in my kid's body. Because instead of it living with the self-doubt and the fear and the self-blame, I've encapsulated it. It's so powerful. I've encapsulated it. I don't know how many of you have been in personal therapy, but there's a lot of people who think therapy is really the process of changing memories. That's literally what therapy does. We don't change events, but by talking about them and understanding and having new frameworks and having someone in that moment with us, in the storytelling, we change how it lives in our body, and that changes how it lives out in our present. I think anyone who's been in like that type of therapy is like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. That's what repair does with our kids. And as the last event before, the last thing I want to do is I want to do a little exercise, because I always feel like our bodies hold so much data and information. It's one of the things that led me to say, there's no way this time-out approach is right. I was like, it just feels wrong. And like, I know there's studies, but I also trust the thing in my body that's like, this feels awful. So parents often say to me, okay, but Becky, you don't understand. My kid is 18 now, or my kid is 40, or this thing happened 4 weeks ago. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to imagine your parent, your actual parent, calling you up right after this event. And if neither of your parents are alive, imagine after this event you find like a letter they wrote you. And they call you up and they say something like this. Hey, I just wanted to tell you, I've been thinking about a lot of the things in your early years. And I think there were a lot of things I did that felt really bad to you. And I never said that to you. And you were right that those felt bad. And I never was there to try to understand you. And that stuff wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. And if you ever want to talk to me about any of the specifics, I won't refute them, I'll listen. I love you. I don't know one adult who wouldn't be like, wow, that would be like pretty profound actually. Like it wouldn't do a 180 maybe on everything, but like that would, like my body even feels that imagery. Like I feel that. And if you think about the data that gives you, it's literally in my mind proof. Wait, if that would be meaningful to me with my parents, I know my kids are younger than me. So like it's really like proof that it's never too late with my kids, because that would still be a really meaningful experience to me. And so I love the idea after I've been doing some live events. I was like, how cool if after these live events, every single person, everyone is like, I'm gonna make a repair with someone in my life. Maybe it's my kid, maybe it's my partner. I'm gonna do some version of like, hey, I wanna talk to you about this thing that happened that I still remember, and it wasn't your fault, and I'm here for you. Like that would have a huge impact. And so that's what I'm gonna do after this too. And I think there'd be a power we felt like in the world, I really do, if we all do some version of that after. So that's the most important parenting strategy of all.
Thank you, Dr. Becky, and thank you for this.
So what I want to do is, Katie's going to be amazing and take a picture. I want everyone to hold their book because it's so vibrant, and I'm going to post it on social. And what some people have done, which was actually someone's idea, it wasn't mine, is they're like, post on social, and then take a screenshot if you want, and you can almost like find yourself, share it, right? Because the other thing I think that's really powerful, something that happened, someone said this to me, they're like, I wrote an Amazon review of your book. This is what they said, and they're like, here's why. Now my heart's racing. This woman was like, here's why I did it, even though I've never written an Amazon review. I know parents, they want to know from me, right? Like, if one parent buys this book because of my review, that's like one more parent who can have like a different framework, and like one more kid who might feel seen or might feel understood. And like this woman was like, and I did that. right? But I was like, you're right. And my friends and I were talking about this last night, and I said this in the beginning, like, I think as humans, we need impact in the world. You need it. It's why I think the community is so powerful, because when you show up and you say something, you see it impact someone else, like, you feel alive. You feel you're generating something. And so repair has impact. Taking this book and talking about an idea in a book club or with a friend is impact. Like, it's actually it's a really amazing feeling to have that. So just remember, you all have that when you share something, when you recommend something, when you start a conversation. It's more than just rewarding to you. Like, it's actually how, in a micro world, we make really, really big change. So thank you, Katie. You'll do this with mine.
And so wait, how do we?
And then after this, we're going to do a Q&A. So you stand there.
And you
Okay,
stand
and
here.
I'm going to stand here, and I'm going to squat.
And we're going
so everyone
vertical.
hold up their book.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try a couple. People on the end, like, poke your heads
Poke your head in. Get in.
Okay. Okay, I think that's good.
Awesome.
I mean, the lighting is a little,
Awesome.
it is what it is.
Got it.
And now we're gonna do Q&As, so stand up or do whatever.
If you have a question and you just raise your hand, Gail and I are going to alternate sides, and we'll try to get to as many questions as time allows. First one right here in the front row.
Hi, Dr. Becky. I was wondering if you could talk about acceptance and forgiveness of yourself as a way to better accept and forgive children.
Amazing question. So here's something I hear a lot from people who maybe have a more behavioral approach, or even, I think we hear this from like the generation above. They're like, how can you let your kid get away with that, right? Things like that. And this is going to answer acceptance and forgiveness. We can't change when we feel shame. Shame literally brings on an evolutionary animal defense freeze state. There's a whole chapter on shame, and I think it'll be one of the ones that you're like, wow, this is so different from anything I've seen, elsewhere, because it had to really get into it. Shame is so powerful in our evolution. It freezes us because we feel unattachable in that moment. So if you want to make sure a kid never changes, like, punish them, give them a lot of timeouts, because when we make kids feel like bad, unlovable, unattachable kids, we actually freeze them and they can't learn. You can't learn and move when you're frozen. Same thing for us. Oh, I yelled at my kids so much. I'm such a bad parent, or I did this thing. I'm awful. People are like, well, acceptance and all this stuff, aren't you letting yourself off the hook? I'm like, you want to let yourself off the hook for change? Blame yourself and do all that stuff. It literally will make it impossible for you to change. If you want to leave yourself on the hook for change, we have to separate our identity from our behavior. There might be behaviors that it's not that we're accepting or forgiving even of ourselves. We're like, yeah, I really didn't like I did that. And there's probably a lot of learnings from those moments. I think the acceptance and forgiveness is like that there's a person underneath who is probably really struggling. And I do think this relates to this pad. This pad I hope you all take with you and use in hard moments. There was nothing more powerful in the community when we did this exercise of take a behavior as a parent that does spiral you into shame, that can make you feel awful. And a lot of them are examples. And fill it into the sentence structure. I'm a good parent who never breastfed her baby. I'm a good parent who yells more than I want. I'm a good parent who counts the hours till bedtime. As soon as we actually form that sentence structure, we almost immediately separate our identity, good, from behavior. That's the only thing that lets us change. So in terms of acceptance and forgiveness, I think there's almost more nuance there for kids and adults. I'm almost accepting that there's a human, there's a whole person separate from this behavior. And actually, as soon as I do that, I can look at the behavior. Why did I do that? I wonder what led to that. I mean, I'm an animal. I am oriented by evolution, so I would never do anything that's working against myself. Where did that come from? At what point was some part of that adaptive early on and then acted out? That thing happened here in my road. I'm thinking about the immediate trigger, but what started it? What was starting the pattern that eventually led to me getting triggered or feeling overwhelmed, right? And I think that's the way we kind of have acceptance and forgiveness of ourselves, because we actually end up seeing that the behavior is part of this story. It's actually trying to teach us something to change. And when we kind of collect data in that framework, we're both able to maintain feeling good inside, and we're able to start to brainstorm ways to make really impactful change.
A question on your right.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Becky. Oh, you want to hold it? What is the impact on children if they have one parent who is, believing that they're good inside and that feelings and connection are key, and another parent who might actually think that kids are bad inside, but who definitely is very focused on like compliance and behavior and sort of fixing the things in the moment? So when you have that duality in a household, what's the impact on kids?
Such a good question, and this question comes up a lot. So if you're thinking, wow, that question speaks to my heart, like, you are not alone, and it's really, really common. So I'm going to answer the question directly, and then I also want to answer what I think is often a question we have under that question. So directly, there's like just a lot of research that shows that like kids need one person. They need one. And like sometimes the kid doesn't even have that one person as an adult. As a parent. They have it as like a teacher. They need one person who they feel really safe with, right? Now, also we know, sure, the more the better. That's just like logical, but they need one. So impact is like, if you're thinking like, I am showing up, my kid feels safe, like, I think you can rest assured, like, that is enough. My kid is gonna hugely benefit from that. The questions underneath that I think are important is what happens in our house when my kid is parented in two very different ways based on which parent is in front of them. And how can I help my kid understand that difference? Because that's really confusing and almost like creates this like switching for them. And there's a nuance here, because I'm never a fan of like throwing a different parent under the bus at all. That's also not good for kids. Kids really struggle in general when parents kind of bad talk another parent, because that's like their other sturdy authority. But I do think, like, you have a kid who is in their room, they got punished, and you're like, what am I even gonna do? My partner did this, I don't know how to manage this. At the very least, a kid needs, again, they need us to tell the truth. They need us to come in and say some version of, I know that's something I wouldn't have done. And maybe the best we say is like, look, this is tricky and I don't have a solution right now. I wanna tell you that me and your other parent are gonna do things the same way. Or probably not for some time. And that's gonna lead to moments that probably feel bad and confusing. But I wanna at least tell you, like, you're right to notice that. You're right to know, I'm up to chills. Like, you're right to know that there is a difference. And I'm sure this feels bad. And I'm sure a part of you is even mad at me for like, hey mom, why can't you stop this? And I take that seriously. And I love you, and at the very least, I'll always come talk to you after these things and let you know that I know they happened, and I'm open to hearing what they were like for you. I think we often don't want to tell our kids the truth when we don't have a solution. Our kids need us to tell the truth the most when there's not a solution. The most. I was just reading the Cheryl Strayed book, and she talks about this beautiful way about her history of working with kids in like really, really bad abusive families and in the state, and basically nothing happened. CPS was like, we don't take cases over 12, and we're understaffed. And she was like, the most important thing I did for them is I never lied. I was like, here's what's happening in your house, and no, I can't take you out of the house. I can't. But after it happens, you can talk to me. I mean, it's so painful. But if I think about that, a story's coming to mind is like her willingness to just really sit in that awful distress with those kids. And she even writes, like, saved some of them because they weren't alone. And so I think when there's this gap between us and a partner, we often think, how can I close the gap? Which definitely is probably helpful for our partnership and for the family in general and how at least can we communicate. But I think we miss centering our kids' experience. If we center their experience, then we really need to focus on naming these things that are true for them. And that, combined with the fact that they have one parent who's really there for them, is gonna be more than enough.
Thank you. Next question here on the left.
Hi, Dr. Becky. I just want to let you know that not only has this helped, me communicating with my two daughters, my approach has been with my husband too, and we are now this incredible, he's a unicorn of a man, of a Filipino man, and we're both Filipinos, and we're breaking so many cycles, the both of us, right? And so, And I'm also an immigrant, and so this has been such a learning experience. And what it has done is your book has given me the power to talk to him in a way that is so loving and caring, and seeing him too as a human being and as a child, seeing what he's grown up with. And what your book has done as well is how I approach my mom and how we've talked and how much we've grown. And the last time she visited me was so beautiful, and it's because of your book that really is how I've talked to her. And and my question is, will you consider writing, the triggers, like what you had mentioned earlier, please? Because I think that is so, it's just goes so well with what you're already doing now. So I just want to let you know, please continue. Please keep doing this, because it has given me so much growth, and not only me, but my relationships to my family as well. So thank you.
Another question over here.
Hi, Dr. Becky. Thank you so much for, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. The good inside. Sorry. I'm sorry.
You can take a moment, and I think this is actually a beautiful example of us together. We have wired apologies next to tears in a massive way. I always think about tears, my body is producing water in my eyes. That's pretty amazing. To get my attention, to be hey, there's something important, please slow down. It literally produced water. Again, the body did that. And then, from our legacy of our early years, right, it was that ultimate sign of your body's truth was shamed. This legacy of shaming, the essence of self-trust. Your body is asking you in the way it can to pause because something important is happening. And then we've learned to ignore the important and do some version of keep going and push that away. And it's so, I think just noticing that is step one. And step two is what I try to tell my kids about tears is your body's trying to tell you something really important. Whatever we were going to do, whatever I was going to say, nothing's as important as that. Let's listen. And it's not my kids are wow, here's what my tears are saying. Obviously not. They're Mom, stop saying such weird stuff, They literally do. My daughter's if I didn't have a psychologist for Mom, she wouldn't say such weird things all the time, So, I always save the apology for a situation that needs it. You can take those, you have two to take back and use. And if you're ready, feel free to ask.
I'm ready. The good inside concept saved my relationship with my son, who's now 5. We've had a really rough start, in the beginning, and I had a really hard time separating his behavior from who he was because I never felt that I was good. It was always my fault. I'm Brazilian. The Latinos, I'm sure here, can relate to the Filipino culture, and being able to do that through your work has profoundly changed my relationship with my kids, with my family as well. And I've been wanting to work with families. I want to leave the corporate world, and I was wondering if you ever think about bringing, to a professional side, help people who want to do this professionally.
Yeah.
Because, I've been looking around. I cannot go back to school right now with, 2 kids and all that. I actually went and did a course at a very well-known university around here. The first class was about the second class punishment and all that, and I left it. I'm I cannot, my whole body screamed, right? But I'm having a hard time finding where to go so I can bring this to other families.
So amazing, number one, and thank you for sharing that. And there's nothing, I really mean this, of this whole experience I've had that's changed my life. Hearing the way I describe a tantrum, I think, is it's when the feelings in a kid's body overpower their ability to manage it. So what happens? They explode out. They literally explode out. if I think about this whole Good Inside journey and these topics and these ideas, I really feel like it's a fire in me that's too big in my body. Like it can't be contained. It literally explodes out of me at 4 a.m. and in writing and in videos. And there's nothing more amazing to me. And I think this is the thing that truly changes the world, as grandiose as that sounds, is I see the way, and that's what you're saying, you're like, it's ignited something that's always been in you. Someone wrote this to me, and I think I posted on Instagram today, is they're like, your work gives me the tools and language to parent in a way that I've just always intuitively known to be true. That's what she said. I was like, and that's exactly, she was like, it's in me. I just like, I couldn't do it. But this is, and so the idea that this fire in me helps, like, there's something about it that ignites a fire that was already sparked in everyone else. And then the same thing explodes out. And you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. That's a movement. And like, this is a movement. It really is. So one of the things I have to say for you that's happening on our platform, and all of our amazing members here would attest to it, is I think the thing that's most compelling is this way. You don't need a degree to be able to say, these values matter, and I want that to explode out of me and help ignite something in someone else. That is literally happening on our platform every day. People are like, they come because they have an issue with their kids, and they're like, after a minute in the platform, they're like, that is the least of what I'm gonna get here. This is so powerful. And there's even a program there we have our mentor program that will have more and more of them over time. Our mentors are people we're training up. Eventually, I would like to have a parent coaching program there where the parent coaches don't have to have a degree, because actually, one of our biggest struggles, we've manualized my approach, not in the book, like for clinicians, and we've trained untraining clinicians from the behavioral mindset that I always think the behavioral approach to parenting and kids has moved in our country from the fiction shelf to the nonfiction shelf. Like it is something that we've just thought is true. It's a theory. It is not a truth. And so there's so much unlearning. So actually the idea of not having to do all the unlearning, right? But there are, yes, this is, so what I would say to anyone is I don't have any concrete plans, but like to say this is happening tomorrow, but that is the place where people are feeling just like you, and the connections and the live events and the different things we're talking about, and exactly, content and conversation, content and community, it is fire when those things come together. Both on their own are amazing, and the book is amazing for content, but how it comes together in community, there's nothing like it. And so I think you should introduce yourself to some of the people in this first row. Ruby, maybe you'll find her after, and we'll get you started.
Thank you so much. We have time for one more question, Gail, on that side. Just want to let everybody know that you are all invited to join us in the atrium afterwards. We've got some apples and honey for the new year, and I think we have a few other things. Maybe please just stick around, have some coffee, and hang out, and let's say hello to each other. Yeah.
Last question over here.
Hi. Oh, you got the mic. I'm literally asking for a friend, but it would be helpful for me too. She's like feeding her baby outside. But how would you advise parents who have lots of little kids close in age together, and sometimes it feels so hard? I was there a couple years ago, but
Yeah.
when it feels so hard to use those Good Inside strategies because you're just putting out your own fires and putting out theirs.
So I think the fire metaphor is a good one to continue with. So as parents, like there's 2 buckets of strategies we need, okay? One is what I call fire containment. Fire containment strategies, the other one are firefighting strategies. If you had a fire in your home, like a literal fire, and you didn't have an extinguisher, because in the metaphor, we don't want to extinguish feelings. We really don't, because the kids lose access to information and who they are. So there's no extinguisher, but if you had a fire, you'd contain the fire, right? You'd like figure out how to stay safe and contain it. Now, if you wanted your house to be less vulnerable next time, once the fire was contained, hopefully you'd do some fireproofing around your house. You'd be like, oh, we have to clean this whatever off our stove, whatever it was. And if you didn't do that, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but I think anyone would know your house would be just as vulnerable to the fire the next time the conditions were the same. But also, you don't want to do that during the fire. Like if during the fire you're fireproofing your house, a friend would be like, wrong order of operations, right? It's really powerful to think about both the stage of parenthood we're in and our kids' struggles in this way. Kids' struggles, what do I do when my kid's having a massive tantrum? That's fire containment. after, what led to that? What conditions were there? What skills were they missing? If I don't actually literally spend time doing that with my kid, doesn't mean I'm a bad person at all. But it also doesn't mean my kids why wouldn't they just do the same thing the next time, right? 2 different buckets. Same thing with stage of parenting. Like when our kids are just young or the baby phase or there's a lot of them and maybe also work is stressful or I just lost my job or I'm in a bad place with my partner, there is something to saying to yourself like, I'm in like a containment mode. Like I'm kind of in survival mode. All these other things, like I trust I'm gonna get there. And part of what I do need to think about is what do I need to carve out a little bit more space in my life for the things that like not only make me survive, but like give me a sense of purpose and impact and excitement, okay? But also, like I'm probably surviving this time. Right? I think another version of this question is like, okay, I have one kid who's tantruming here, another one who's hitting, and another one who's like peeing all over our carpet. What would you do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what? I have no idea. What would you do? You just like hope the moment ends. Like that's honestly what I would do. You know, like and if there's somebody who tells you like an amazing strategy, I hope you're like, I wouldn't try to be like, unless you're a magician, you know, the best thing you could do is tell the truth. In that moment, I would hope to have the composure to say to my kids, there's 3 kids who need me and there's 1 of me. You need a mommy, you need a mommy, you need a mommy. I'd be like, I need a mommy, right? Like there needs to be 4 mommies and there's 1. And so something I say to my kids sometimes is, nothing's gonna feel good right now. And we're just gonna get through it. And when you have that, whatever it is, that baby and that 18-month-old and that 2.5-year-old, I think the best thing you can do is remind yourself, this feels hard because it is hard, not because I'm doing something wrong. This feels hard because it is hard. Again, there's such a like simplicity to that. It's amazing what we do as humans. I have 3 kids, they're so young, and then we're like, what's wrong with me? I'm like, it's like the answer is like, have you seen this situation? And again, it goes to how poorly we're prepared. Nobody talks about what parenting really is, and we're given these movies, and you're given these narratives, and you're seeing these pictures. It is just not like this. It feels hard because it is hard, and if people here, if you don't have friends or a community where people will say that to you, yeah, this isn't a you thing. This is just a shit show for everybody. We need that. And then I would say, like, I'm not in skill building mode right now. I know I'm gonna get there, I'm just not, and that's okay. I'm a good parent who's surviving these months. I'm a good parent with 3 young kids. I'm a good parent who feels overwhelmed. Where do I hope we get to next? My big hope with Everything in Good Inside is we help parents go from what is wrong with me to what resources and support do I deserve and how can I get them? So I think the other thing is that question. When you're up at night and you finally have like 30 seconds between when your kid goes to bed and you pass out, you know, that you say to yourself, hi, what is wrong with me thoughts? That's that legacy of self-blame that worked for me early on when I was alone, right? There's something to say to our old patterns, like, really, thank you for your years of service. You have served me when I didn't have anyone. You actually helped me get through hard years. Our patterns all actually need respect and gratitude before they're willing to release, all of them, and we usually give them the opposite. So get ready for that, and then I think the question after is, are there resources and support out there when I'm having these 3 young kids, when I'm having a kid who's having these massive meltdowns and I feel overwhelmed, that I need, right? If we think about like a surgeon, if a surgeon you were going to was like, hey, I did this extra training and I'm in this support group with other surgeons. I don't know anyone who'd be like, oh, what kind of, like, I don't want to go to that surgeon. You'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. I want to go to you because you're getting the most training and resources and support. Would you ever go to a surgeon who's like, I get my tips on Instagram? You'd be like, that's all? They're like, yeah, like here and there, and I'm figuring it out. It'd be like, it's like the opposite message. We think people in important jobs, except for parenting, who invest in themselves and get support, we give them like adulation. And I think it's time to like really shift that narrative to us. And to say, like, there are resources out there, and the resource might be texting a friend and just saying, please tell me that it gets easier, you know? Please literally tell me nothing but that. Please tell me that this really is hard because it, you know, it just is that way. That's something, right? It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be a membership. It could be a text, right? Or it could be something bigger depending on what we need. And so I think that shift is huge. And I think when parents make that shift, when a whole generation of women make the shift from what's wrong with me to what do I need and what do I deserve, I promise you a lot more is going to change in the world than parenting. That is right. So let's end on that note. Thank you for being here, really. And as you walk out, just like you all had to do something to get here. You did. Store that. And you could have, if you carved out time, been doing something else. Like, it's brave to learn and consider new ideas. So as you walk out, like, just connect with your body. Like, really tell yourself, this mattered. I did something really important today. I did something really big. And really give yourself credit. Take the time to do that, because that practice is really, really important. So you're all, seriously, you're all amazing. Thank you for spending this time here. And let's go change things together.